Hello, it is Jorbs. I think a recurring dark humor type joke on my channel is that I should make a consent 101 video for strategy gamers because it has felt for the last more than 3 years, I would say, that every month we have another gamer moment where somebody fails at consent spectacularly and very publicly in the gaming community. And like so many of these people are smart, intelligent people who just don't need to fail at consent. It's not the most complicated thing to understand. But at the same time, a lot of the conversation about how they failed at consent doesn't succeed at being constructive. It doesn't present a positive way to be good at navigating consent and understanding people's boundaries. Instead, it is just like, this is a thing you shouldn't do. Don't do that. You are bad, which is all true. But, like, yeah, maybe somebody should make the video that's like, yeah, so here's what you could do. Um, Maybe that would help. Yeah, so I was talking with my therapist about this, and we were like discussing current literature about consent and things, and I was just like, oh, I should like just make the video. It is fresh in my mind. Anyway, so rather than being like consent is very black and white, someone can say yes to something or no to it, you ask them for it. That's what consent is. That's a very reductive understanding of what consent is. So, a heuristic that I've found that is really useful for me to think about consent is to think about who's doing something and who is it for. And this comes from the Wheel of Consent, is what you should Google if you want to learn more about this heuristic for thinking about consent. So, if I am doing something to you for your benefit, I can call that giving something to you. I can give you a massage. If I am doing something to you for my benefit, I can call that taking something from you, ravishing you, all sorts of hot sexual things in full, like acting on your own passions using somebody else. And there's nothing like wrong with that if it's consensual, but if it's not consensual, it's like a really bad thing to do. Um, and this like often comes up, especially with strategy gamers who want to take and are very intelligent, and so they understand how to manipulate situations and get what they want from another person who doesn't necessarily want to give it to them. That is a lot of what playing competitive strategy games is about and what it teaches you to do. And so when you want to take something from someone and you don't just get it immediately, sometimes gamers like turn on their gamer brain. Don't. Very inappropriate place to do that. You can just negotiate this consensually with somebody and have it in your life in a healthy way. Better. Um, if you do something to me for your benefit, so like the corollary to taking on the other side of it, that's called allowing. Um, as a man, I don't feel like I am asked to allow things that much in my life in situations regarding consent because of like gender roles and stuff, but consent doesn't have to be gendered for any reason. And one thing about learning about consent is that you can maybe start thinking, assuming that you yourself are a man. A lot of my audience is male. Sorry if you're not. I'm talking to the wrong person if that's the case, but maybe it's still interesting to you. I don't know. I'll talk to you too, probably. Um, anyway, you can like be with a partner and be like, hey, I know like I'm a man, I am masculine, society says certain things about my gender, but you might enjoy doing things with me that are for you, and I'd be okay with that. If you want to explore what those are, that that's cool. Um, Realizing that that's an option and like actively bringing up is a fun thing to do. And then there's receiving, where you do something to me for my benefit. So corollary to giving, receiving a massage. Um, Listening to me talk about my day. Like this stuff doesn't have to be sexual. Navigating consent can be about things which are completely non-sexual as well. What we're really looking at is a model of two people negotiating what they want. I feel like negotiating is a wrong word to use, but navigating what they want in a way that is like honest and respectful and not duplicitous or manipulative. So this is something that doesn't have to be contained to sexual relationships. You can do this in friendships. You can do this in business. Um, all of these things are okay things to want in certain situations. With consent, you can then go and do them. Um, yeah, I feel like if you just start with this idea that all four of these things exist and that there are situations where they're all okay, um, like your world gets to open up and you get to start thinking about all of the different things you can do in all sorts of different relationships. Like sometimes in business situations, I will give people things, which, like, if you think that business is about you have to be acting in your own self interest for your own personal profit, that doesn't make any sense. But if you think that business is like a way for like two parties to do things together, then like giving people stuff in business is like nice and fun sometimes. And it's not like doing somebody a favor has no benefit for you down the road necessarily. It can even be a self-interested thing, but you don't even have to start it self-interested. You can just be like, well, there are lots of ways for us to interact. Here's a heuristic about what those are. Would I like to do this one right now? Sure, maybe. I have expertise here. You seem like you could benefit from it. Here, give you something. You're allowed to do that. Okay. A note here, you do not need to feel ashamed or self-conscious about wanting any of these things. I feel like sometimes one of the reasons that people get consent wrong is that they don't want to admit that they want to do something. They don't want to admit that they want to be selfish right now or something like that. You can be selfish sometimes in consensual settings if the other person's consenting to it, and it can be really cool. Just like be honest about it and find someone who's into it. Yeah. All right. Cool. Honestly, that's most of the presentation, but I do have some more slides. But if you just left like knowing the thing I just said, I feel like that would fix like 95% of the problems I see already. Anyway, slide number 3, don't fuck up the options. I mentioned this in passing earlier, but especially strategy gamers are very good at wanting something and working out a way to get that thing without the other person necessarily wanting to let them have that thing. And you just should not do that in consensual situations. You are betraying the contract of consent, basically. So, some examples. If you say that you want to give me a massage to make me feel good, but actually you just want to feel me up, that's really bad. Um, there are situations where it's okay to feel somebody up if they're like consenting and into it, but it's really bad to like say that it's a massage for them and then like psych, that's not actually what it was about. Um, I feel like this was something that I like patterned into getting wrong as a teenager. I am like, consent is not something that necessarily exists in an ideal state in the mind of a child. And so, certainly, as I was developing sexually and also in friendships and stuff like that, I got things wrong about these sorts of things. And so, I remember one thing that I thought was like, it's really hot to like say that I want to give somebody a massage, and then it like turns into more. It's like super sexy and they get into it and stuff happens. And like that's actually just kind of manipulative and weird. Um if I pledge to give you a massage to make you feel good, but it's actually about like having sex afterwards, that's not a good thing. Um it's, yeah, it's manipulative. It's kind of a betrayal of, it's not me being trustworthy. It's not me following through on what I pledged to follow through on. Just realized that I didn't actually order my dinner. I was like, I will order dinner and then make a video, and I never pressed the button that ordered it. Oh well. Well, I'll get it slightly later. Cool. Um, to me, that is the most resonating with my experience of the ways to do this wrong. Um, saying that I want to give somebody something in the belief that it will turn into more than that. And it's not the most awful way to get consent wrong in the entire world, to be sure, but it's like still subpar and bad. Um, there are lots of ways to get consent wrong that are not, this is an awful thing you should go to jail for. They're just like, you're kind of bad at consent and you did it wrong. Which is why it's like useful to think about consent and get good at doing it right. Other ones, though, you taking goes wrong if it's actually for me, which is really weird. But if I decide that I am going to allow you to take something from me, and then you like do stuff that you think I'll enjoy instead of doing the stuff that you want, that's actually a betrayal of the consent that I gave you. And like, yeah, again, this is not, generally speaking, going to be a terrible thing that you should go to jail for, but you are failing at consent. You do that. Um, I feel like that's insane. Um, intuitively, as a man who has been told my entire life that my sexuality is threatening, and that, you know, taking in situations with consent is very hard for me personally, just because I constantly feel like I am navigating the way that I am threatening. And so the idea that someone could be okay with me doing what I want is, it doesn't quite click on in my head very well. But I mean, yeah, you can have that consensually, and consent shouldn't really be gendered. There's no reason for gender to enter into this other than that gender perforates everything and fucks up a lot of stuff when it does. So, you know, that is the wrong way to take, and it does kind of suck to do that. You allowing goes wrong if it's only the things that you want. So, allowing somebody to use you for their own stuff is, it can sound like an insane thing to do. I think a lot of people who have walls up, who are protective of themselves, who have had traumatic experiences in relationships in the past, like, the idea of doing that just sounds completely insane. Why would you do that? But it can be very enjoyable. It's like an act of service. It is a way of being useful to another person, which can feel very nice. There are ways that this is great, but like pledging to do that and then not actually engaging in doing it kind of sucks for the other person who you just said, like, oh yeah, act on your desires, like do your thing, and then immediately in your own brain you're like, whoa 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 whoa, I don't like this, I don't like this, I need them to do this for me. Obviously, I hope that it goes without saying at this point in the presentation that like you can have boundaries and say no, and you don't have to do things that people ask you to do. But if you do say that you want to do a thing and then you don't follow through on it, that does suck a little bit. Again, not something that you should likely be in jail for or anything absolutely terrible, but you are kind of failing at consent a little bit there. And then your receiving goes wrong if it isn't what you want. So sometimes there's a miscommunication where one person offers to give somebody something and the other person thinks that the person really, really wants to give it to them for themselves. Like if I say, hey, can I give you a massage? Would that make you feel good? And you think to yourself, he wants to give me a massage. I'll say yes to that, even though I don't really feel like a massage right now. Again, we're failing at consent. Um, I'm trying to express that I want to do something for you, and you are thinking, I will let him do something for me, even though it's not something I'd really enjoy right now. Again, not a thing that either of us should go to jail for, but we're kind of just like wasting time and energy that we could be spending making each other much happier than we are. So there's a lot of room to be good at consent and to successfully arrive at doing the things that make both of you happy, or maybe there are more than two of you. I'm not trying to restrict what this is in any way. Yeah. All right. Slide number 4, how to navigate consent for these things. You literally just ask the other person. You just say the things. You just communicate with another person. Which, like, pop culture would have you believe that, like, you should, I don't know, hit the gym, get super hot, only say a certain word, phrase things a certain way. I remember growing up in the strategy gaming circles around poker, the pickup artist community was huge because this was like, well, we were a bunch of guys, poker players, predominantly guys at the time, still are. We're a bunch of guys, we're young guys, so we're like kind of horny. Um, we think we're great, but we don't seem to be doing great with women for some reason. Note, they were not actually that great. But like, how can we solve this problem? Because we are strategy gamers, we know how to solve problems. One thing that was very common was like lengthy posts about pickup artistry. Like, you have to. God, I remember one that was like, once you get the woman back to the room, this is the way to ask if um, she wants to have sex, because this is the way that makes it least likely that she will say no. Something like, do you want me to get a condom? Because that way, if she says no, it's like, what, you don't like safe, protective sex? Just really grotesque, ugh, like horribly awful, wrong approaches to consent that just sucked. Um, Starting premise for you should be like, my partner is a human being who I should respect. And another starting premise that you should have is like, lots of human beings like physical intimacy and consenting to things and making me feel good and me making them feel good. I don't need to be manipulative to get this stuff. Like, we are talking about something that is like a biological evolutionary urge of our species. You don't have to like lie and cheat your way to get it with somebody else. It's like, oh my god, how fucking bad are you at sex that you are having having to manipulate another person in order to get it? It's like a thing you can do basically for free that is immensely pleasurable for both people. What the fuck is going on? What is wrong with the world that you live in? Anyway, um I don't mean to make you feel bad if you are struggling to find sexual partners. I know that that can be very hard. It is not an indicator that you are a bad person. But if you are struggling with that problem and the way that you are trying to solve it is to be manipulative and skirt your way around consent and be dishonest, then yeah, you're a fucking bad person. Take a look in the mirror, be a better person. It's just not hard in this situation to be a better person than that. Um, Note that lots of people are bad at consent, and it's not necessarily in an I am going to do things non consensually way. It is not necessarily in a way that means you should go to jail. Um, but a lot of people are bad at consent in terms of they are not good at clearly communicating or understanding what they want, or hearing what their partner wants. And I mean, you can talk about this with somebody and get better at it. And I would recommend it. Um, I think in general, like, our Western society's sexual relationships are so fucking weird, and it's just, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that complex, and we shouldn't be getting it so wrong all the time. Um, God, I had someone tell me that being a cis woman was traumatic today, and I had like three responses to that today. One was like, that's really kind of funny. Like, I mean, she was saying it to be funny, and she was saying it to lean into the absurdity of it, and so I like smiled and laughed a little bit, which like is what she was happy for me to do. But also that made me really sad, because that shouldn't be a traumatic experience. And yeah, that really sucks. Um, but also three, it was not the first time this week that I had had a cisgender woman express that to me. So I also just felt like Jesus fuck, please stop. Please like just be nice to people. I don't know. I don't know. So much of this stuff, so much of the ways that consent becomes unhealthy and manipulative and scheming and etc. is because of a lack of trust around consent, because so few people are good at it and honest about it, that societally people don't get to enter into conversations about consent with an expectation that they will be good, honest conversations. So, maybe try to be a part of that getting better, because genuinely, it is not that hard. Just like really, in terms of like low hanging fruit for making the world a better place, this thing. So, what if you want something but don't get consent for it? Do I need the rest of the slide? I hope I don't need the rest of like, do not do it. Just don't do it. I feel like a lot of like pickup artistry though, and like messaging about gender and being an alpha male and stuff like that is like, this is how you get the things that you want. The way you get the things that you want is you find somebody who also wants them, and then you like have them together consensually. It's not like scheming and manipulating and tricking people, or bargaining or confrontationally maneuvering. Yeah, if someone doesn't want to do what you want to do, you just don't do it with them. It is possible to find other people to do it with instead. They may not be the partner for you if something that is important and central to your enjoyment of life is a thing they're unwilling to do with you. That's okay. You're you're allowed to not continue a relationship with someone if they are not interested in things that you're interested in. It's allowed. Can be sad, but probably going to be better for both of you. Note here that it is okay to have conversations with partners about how certain things are important to you, but if they aren't what they want and they're not interested in doing them for you, like stop trying. Um, it There is a line that you cross where it goes from honestly expressing interest to badgering, and because our society is so bad at talking about consent and stuff, where that line is can be a little bit different for different people. Sometimes someone takes the smallest thing as an expression of interest, and sometimes somebody like really needs to be clubbed over the head with like, I'm really super into you, I'm being serious right now, I like you, before they'll believe you. I mean, sometimes they're just never going to believe you. Um, Unfortunately, people are unique things, and different people work different ways. Um, but yeah, you want to try to find that successful communication place where you are expressing interest in something with a person without crossing into them feeling like you are badgering them or pestering them about it. And if you reach that place and they say no to the thing, well, they know you want it. Maybe if your relationship continues in the future, they would change their mind about whether they want it too. But, you know, in the meanwhile, don't pester, don't badger, don't manipulate, etc. Consent can change. Slide 6. So, part 1, perhaps the more important part, I feel like stopping people from doing harm around consent is probably the most important thing to do first. It is also worth pointing out again and again that if you do consent well, you get to achieve good with it. So recognizing also that like you can do good by being good at consent is an important thing to have in mind. Anyway, consent isn't given indefinitely. I really hope that everybody watching this presentation already understands that. Someone can be okay with kissing you one night and then not be okay with it the next night. They can even not be okay with it like while they are kissing you. They can just say like, okay, I don't want this anymore. If somebody withdraws consent, you stop doing the thing. There's no perpetual entitlement involved in consent, and there shouldn't be. There is no perpetual entitlement involved in anything in the world, and certainly not in doing something with somebody else's body. This goes the other way too, though. Somebody can not consent to something, but then consent to it later, and you're allowed to do that. And nothing like, sometimes people talk about somebody teasing or leading on or behaving badly surrounding the idea of consent changing or implying consent and then withdrawing it or things like that. Consent changing from a yes to no or a no to yes does not necessarily imply that at all. It is very normal to be okay with doing something one day and not be okay with doing it the next, or vice versa. This is something that is true for me in my life for all sorts of things all the time. And so while it is plausible that somebody could tease or lead you on or whatever, that is a way that people can be bad at consent. And so many people are bad at consent in so many ways. Just because somebody changes from a yes to a no or a no to a yes doesn't mean they are doing that or that they are a bad person or whatever. You need to provide space for no's to change to yeses and yeses to change to no's in conversations about consent. And if you do, you'll be better at it. I've mentioned this as well, but it felt like it deserved an entire slide. Consent doesn't have to be gendered. As a guy growing up, I was taught that boys were meant to ask girls for things, that girls were meant to give the things to the boys, etc., etc., etc. I have had many partners in my life who just like have trouble having desires in a sexual relationship because they are a woman and they were never allowed to, kind of. This all just kind of sucks. Consent around like me or you doing things for me or you, like, these are just all fun things for a human being to be a part of, regardless of their gender. They're all things that you can learn to be good at and learn to appreciate. And so I would encourage you to like break away from gendered thinking if you are thinking in a gendered way about consent. I would honestly encourage you to break away from gendered thinking just in general. But especially in terms of consent, it does not feel like a place that gendered thinking is appropriate at all. So, it's good for women to want things and ask for them. Yay. It's good for men to listen and give things to partners. Yay. And all four types of consent are enjoyable, and which ones you enjoy shouldn't depend on your gender. A goal of mine is to be someone who enjoys all four types of consent and who is enjoyable to be in all four of those types of consent with for a partner. And yeah, like me being a man has nothing to do with that whatsoever. It's just because they're all fun. Yeah. The final slide, like slanting into a like more positive mindset here for a moment, hopefully a little bit. Actively loving someone means doing things that are important to them sometimes. Not all the time. It doesn't mean stopping being your own human being or anything like that. But if consent for you only means that you're ever consenting to something that you want and it is for you, and you're 100% into it just for your own reasons, and you're never thinking like, well, my partner would really like that, and I like them, so I would like to, help them have it. That's kind of, I mean, we're no longer really talking about a failure of consent there. It's more like a failure of relationship of like connecting with a human being, of being a part of a team with another person. Like, yeah. And my hope in giving you like this toolkit is that you can get to a point where you trust another person and you are clearly good at consent, or at least trying to be good at consent. Maybe you still make small mistakes in places, but you're willing to own up to them and improve. Once you establish that that's going on, then you and your person can start to work on using consent positively. So you can work out, oh, they'd really like this thing. I wouldn't have thought of that on my own, but I could give that to them and they'd enjoy it. And that's really cool. That that is a lovely part of relationships, I would say, when we do something that makes the world as a whole a better place because the other person brought it into our life. And one way you can make the world as a whole a better place is to make your partner happy, make them feel like fulfilled and give them a thing they desire. And that's cool. So, yeah, hopefully this spoke to like one person at least, and people can like have better relationships because of it. That would be cool. Yeah. I know so many like cool, intelligent, attractive, wonderful human beings who just get really stuck in relationships and don't understand how they work at all. And I also know people who get really uncomfortable around things with lots of gray areas and complexity. A lot of people who are drawn to strategy games don't like dealing with stuff that's uncertain. They want like a clear rule set that they can operate within. Sometimes that's like a shelter from trauma where like the world is an uncertain place and this has treated us badly in the past. So we just need something that's like under our control and can't hurt us. And that's why we play games. But yeah, if you can get to a point with another person where you're understanding them and what they desire and communicating honestly, truly, and understandably what you desire, it can be really cool. And it doesn't have to be scary. You can get to a point where it isn't scary at all. So that is my hope. And I hope that this has helped somebody. Cool. Thank you. Bye bye.